The cost of living crisis. Everyone calls it that. Politicians blame it on supply chains, on Russia, on corporate greed, on anything except the actual cause. Here's what nobody wants to say. Prices don't have to go up. They just don't. Inflation isn't some natural force like gravity. It's a choice. A deliberate policy decision made by central banks and governments who decided that constantly devaluing your money was somehow good for the economy. But smart people know better. Sovereign nations know better, and they're making moves to exit this system before it implodes completely. Because the establishment overplayed their hand during COVID. They printed so much money, suppressed interest rates so aggressively, and locked down economies so completely that people finally woke up and asked the question they should have been asking for decades. Why is my money worth less every year? And once you ask that question, everything else starts to unravel. Quantitative easing is just inflation in disguise. Let's call it what it is. Quantitative easing, the polite term for we're printing money and hoping you don't notice. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, trillions created out of thin air. They told you it was to stabilize the economy. What they didn't tell you is that every dollar they printed made your existing dollars worth less. That's inflation. COVID gave them the perfect excuse to go nuclear. Money printer goes brrr became a meme because it was so transparently obvious. But once you start, you can't stop, because the system is built on debt. And debt only works if money keeps flowing and interest rates stay low. Which brings us to the next problem. Interest rates. The trap nobody escapes. Interest rates have been artificially suppressed for over a decade, near zero. Sometimes actually zero. Why? Because the system needs you to borrow, not save. Saving is punished. Your money earns 0.5% while inflation runs at 8%. You're losing purchasing power every day. But if rates go up to where they should be to actually reward savers, the house of cards collapses. Governments can't afford interest payments. Corporations can't service loans. Mortgages become unaffordable, so they keep rates low. The problem gets worse. The gap between asset prices and real incomes widens, which is why you get the absurdity we're living in right now. How are house prices still high if no one can buy one? House prices at all-time highs. Meanwhile, an entire generation locked out of homeownership. Mortgages unaffordable. Rents consume half of income. So who's buying? Investors, corporations, foreign capital. People who already own property using cheap debt to buy more. It's not a housing market, it's an asset inflation bubble. And the people who need homes? Collateral damage, told to work harder, stop buying avocado toast. Meanwhile, money supply expands, interest rates stay low, asset prices climb further out of reach. This isn't a market, it's a wealth transfer from people who work for money to people who own assets. The world is exiting the dollar system. Peter Schiff has been saying it for years. The dollar's dominance is ending. China and Russia settling trade in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia accepting yuan for oil. BRICS nations building alternative payment systems. Central banks dumping U.S. treasuries and buying gold. Gold, the asset central banks told you was a barbarous relic. Except they're buying it. Aggressively. The dollar's reserve status allowed the U.S. to export inflation, to print without consequence because everyone needed dollars. But that deal is breaking. Countries are tired of holding depreciating dollars, tired of getting sanctioned whenever they disagree with U.S. policy. So they're building alternatives. Slowly. Deliberately. And when the dollar loses reserve status, the U.S. economy faces a reckoning it's not prepared for. The AI revolution requires a reset. We're entering the next industrial revolution. Artificial intelligence, automation, and the current financial system can't handle it. The system is built on constant growth, consumption, debt expansion, more people working more hours. But AI doesn't need that. AI is deflationary. It makes things cheaper, more efficient, requires less human labor, which means less income, less consumption, less debt creation. The entire model breaks, so a reset is coming. By design or collapse, the system has to change, and maybe that was the plan all along.